Hey guys, thanks for coming back and joining us here at Salty Ginger Talk. So today we're going to talk about what I call getting over the reef. So getting over the reef is establishing a new habit or dropping an old habit or making a change that you've been trying to make or want to make for a while, but it's difficult. And my getting over the reef reference is actually in relation to Castaway, the movie with Tom Hanks stuck on the island after his plane crashes. So when you think about that movie, the entire movie is about him getting over the reef to get off of that island so he can get rescued. Once he determines that he can't just stay there anymore, he's like, I got to get off the island or I'm going to die here. But the challenge is getting over the reef. And so he puts the plan together, and I think that's an important part of it. Is he didn't just jump on a log and try to float out into the ocean. He made several attempts that failed, and then figured out when the seasons were best, when the winds were best, when the tides were best, when his best shot of success was, and that's when he made his move. And he gets over the reef, out into the open ocean, gets rescued. But it was the getting over the reef that was the hardest part of the whole thing. And so that's what we're talking about today: is how do you start? How do you change? How do you make a change on something that you're trying to change but you're having difficulty with? And so to do this, I read a book several years ago called Atomic Habits. It was written by James Clear, and everything I'm going to talk about today is essentially regurgitating all of the research that he did such a good job of putting together and kind of explaining in his book Atomic Habits. If you have not read that book, I highly recommend you read that book. Excuse me, because he does an outstanding job of really laying things out and making it very crystal clear how habits are formed and what you can do to try to change your habits, whether they be good habits you want to begin or bad habits you want to stop. So, with that said, let's dive in. A habit is made up. He does a good job of explaining this. There's four parts to a cue, a trigger, something cues it that makes a craving in your mind. It's easy to think about a food craving or I want to see a movie, this particular movie, or those types of things. There's a response. What do you do to enable, to satisfy that craving? And then there's a reward. And that reward is the satisfaction you get, which is almost always, at least initially, triggered by dopamine coming from your brain. And there's been a lot of research on the use of social media. And it would be great if anyone knew intentionally that when we started doing all this electronic stuff and likes and follows and comments and all of those things that happen online, the reason you feel good when those things happen is because there's a little bit of dopamine that's released into your system. Now, anyone that's done the same thing over and over again, like I can tell you, like I used to play baseball. So, my first varsity baseball game was a big deal. My 100th varsity baseball game wasn't a big deal because it was old hat and the dopamine rush was gone. Same thing with junior college, same thing with Division One, et cetera, et cetera. So, um, anyone that's had experience in something knows that the more you do it, the more familiar it becomes, the less nervous, anxious, or excited you get about it. It's just human nature. And that's actually a chemical reaction that's going on inside your brain mostly, where dopamine is released. So cue, craving, response, reward. Now, the whole point of um, the the way to influence those things is the cue. You got to make the cue very obvious. The craving has to be attractive. It has to be something that you want to do, not something you don't want to do. You got to make it easy. That's the response. Has to be easy, and then the reward has to be satisfying. So those are the four steps to building a good habit. Now, flip that around to get rid of a bad habit. On the cue, make it invisible. Get rid of it. Stop the cue from happening. The craving, make it unattractive. Change, disassociate the good thing you used to get and reassociate it with something negative. Because what's positive gets rewarded, what's negative gets avoided. That's just human nature. That's the way to break a bad habit. The response, make it hard. Make it hard to respond or do the thing that you used to do to get the reward that you used to get or seek. And then the reward, make it unsatisfying. Change your mindset about the reward. And that's hard because you have to disassociate something that used to be associated with the dopamine release in your brain to no longer be associated with the dopamine release in your brain. So we're going to go through some very specific tools that you can use to accomplish these. The first one is just awareness. You have to be very aware of what your whatever your habit is, focusing on what is the cue that causes that. Make a list of your daily habits from starting to end. I can tell you the very first thing I do when I get up is brush my teeth. I literally stumble through the dark to the bathroom and brush my teeth. First thing. It's literally the first thing I do when I get out of bed. Now, I think that's a good habit. I'm 52 and I've never had a cavity in my life, not once. A lot of that is due to good genetics. I was fortunate I was born with good teeth, but I've also taken care of those teeth every single day. I was not a kid you had to tell to brush your teeth. I've had that habit since I was like 7 years old. So start there. And then once you have that, and just make a list of all your habits throughout the day, whatever they are. Once you've got that list, look at each habit and put it into one of three categories. Is it good? Is it bad? Or is it neutral? And it's up to you. You get to decide what's good, what's bad, and what's neutral. But it's very important to make those decisions and categorize things that way. And if you go back and watch one of our previous episodes, we talked about a little 2x2 grid on where to spend your time. That's how I do this sometimes to say, okay, what do I want to spend my time on? I'll make a 2x2 grid where the x-axis is easy to hard, or call it easy to hard, and then the y-axis is high reward to low reward. And you want to focus on the stuff that's easy and has a high reward. The same thing with your habits. If you want to focus on breaking your bad habits, focus on the ones that are the easiest to break, that'll give you a higher reward. Or if you want to start a new habit, focus on the ones that are good and will give you a higher easy and will give you a high reward. That's a great way to go about it. And it's very important to try to focus on one thing at a time. If you try to do 3 or 4 things at a time, how many times have you said, when I wake up tomorrow, I'm going to eat right, I'm going to exercise, I'm going to drink less, I'm going to spend more time with my kids, I'm going to write in my journal, I'm going to solve the Middle East peace problem. Like we all like to be very ambitious and say we're going to do all of these things. Not the way to accomplish stuff. The way to accomplish stuff is to make small changes and consistently make them over time and turn them into habits, which is why we're talking about what we're talking about today. So after you do that, so we've made our list, we've ranked it good, bad, and neutral. We've picked our habit. We say, hey, I'm going to pick this habit and I'm going to make it my focus, and I'm going to get this one under my belt before I move on to anything else. So the research shows that being deliberate, very deliberate about your habits, forces you to stick with them longer. In general, people stick with them longer if they're very deliberate. So I'm going to lose weight. Okay, let's just call that our habit that we want to change. Or I'm going to eat healthier food, whatever, doesn't matter. Let's just stick with the healthier food one because it's easy. Instead of that, I'm going to have 20 grams of protein at breakfast. I'm going to have 50 grams of protein at lunch, and I'm going to have 50 grams of protein at dinner. The only snack I'm going to eat is yogurt. Those are very specific. And you can even go further and say, I'm going to have breakfast every morning at 7 a.m. I'm going to have lunch every day at noon. I'm going to have dinner every day at 6 o'clock, and I'm not going to eat other than those 3 meals. Those are very specific intentions. And, you know, you may hit them, you may not hit them. What I just laid out is probably pretty ambitious just to change all that at once. But you got to be specific in what you're trying to accomplish. Let's say you want to work out more. You want to get into better physical shape, weight aside. Because I think we spend a lot of time talking about working out as a weight control measure. Working out really is not a weight control measure. Does it help a little bit? Sure. But your weight control is probably 90% diet and 10% exercise. But there's so much benefit to your mental and physical health to exercise. It's a very good habit to develop. So set specific intentions. I'm going to go to the gym every day at 7 a.m. except for Sunday. I'm going to take Sundays off. Monday through Saturday, I'm going to be at the gym at 7 a.m. every day. And just start there. Like you can start just there and just show up at the gym and don't even go in. But going to the gym, getting into the habit of I get up every morning and I go to the gym, At some point, you're going to feel like, okay, this is stupid for me not to go into the gym. So you'll start going into the gym. But if you make yourself get up and drive every day, you've got a much better chance of sticking to your habit because you've got a specific target. I'm going to be at the gym at 7 a.m. Monday through Saturday, every day. That's how it's going to work. Another thing you can do is stack your habits. So if you've got a habit that is good and you want it to continue, put something else after it. So let's say that you eat a healthy dinner every night. You're very religious about it. You eat a clean, high protein, vegetable dinner, and you want to start exercising. Say after dinner, I'm going to go for a 10-minute walk, period, every night, no matter what. You can walk for 10 minutes anywhere at any time. So stacking that habit and tying a habit you want to enforce to a habit you've already got under control and as part of your repertoire is a good way to go. Stacking habits. Next, pay attention to your environment. So your environment has such an influence on your habits. If you wanted to stop drinking, would you go hang out at a bar? No, everybody's there drinking, right? That's not a good environment in which to enforce change your habit or establish a new habit. So it's whatever's easy will usually win. So if you're at a bar where it's easy to get alcohol, it's going to be harder to not drink alcohol. It's easier to drink alcohol and it's going to win, even though that's not what you're trying to do. So by reducing your exposure to those habits, it's important. If you're trying to eat healthier, get rid of all the cookies and candy and junk food that's in plain sight and put a bowl of fruit on your counter. Right? So that's your environment. Your environment changes. Instead of having a bag of Chips Ahoy, you have a bowl of apples on your counter, right? That's very different. So reduce your exposure to the bad habits and increase your exposure to things that will encourage you to change your habits or create better habits. And, that's all part of your environment. You also want to make habits attractive so that they ignite cravings. Because again, remember, it's almost always dopamine that's driving any habit, whether you're overeating, whether you're smoking, whether you're drinking, whether you're doing whatever, running, yoga. It's almost always linked to a dopamine release in your brain. Now, some of the things I just listed there are better than others, and it's good to associate the attraction to that habit with the good feeling you get from it. And so you want to make, if you want your habit to stick, you want to make it as pleasant as possible to associate good times and good feelings, largely triggered by dopamine release, with your habit. So link if you're trying to establish something new, link it to something that you enjoy. So give yourself a positive reward and something that you already normally do. So let's just say, for example, my wife really likes the Real Housewives shows. And look, I watch stupid movies over and over again. I'm in no place to judge whether those are good or bad. I could probably recite every line from about 10 80s comedies to anyone that will listen. So it's not throwing stones at anybody. But let's just say my wife wanted to start running on the treadmill. And if she was going to run on the treadmill, she could combine that with, I'm going to watch an episode of one of my shows while I run on the treadmill. So, or make it a reward. I'm going to run on the treadmill. I'm going to reward myself when I'm done by allowing myself to watch one of my episodes. That's a good example of linking it to something satisfying. Or like we talked about, the walk, right? Walking is such a great activity. It's so good for your body and it's so good for your mental state. Just take a 10-minute walk after every meal. Like, it doesn't matter where you are, if you're at work, wherever, you can take a 10-minute walk. You can always take a 10-minute walk. If you do that 5 times a day, you walk for 15 minutes. That's 5,000 steps just from taking 5-10-minute walks. So that's a good way to stack habits or tie it to something that's useful. Also, think about your surroundings. Who do you surround yourself with? What kind of culture are you around? And so we do so much without thinking about it just because we're influenced by what we're around. I've heard it say, it was Jim Rohn, R-O-H-N, that said you are the sum average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. I think there's probably a lot of truth in that. So if you're surrounding yourself with low achievers, with people that don't want much out of life, with people that are lazy, with people that complain a lot, with people that have a victim mentality, you're probably going to develop a lot of those habits and mentalities as well. That's why you see a lot of these echo chambers, regardless whether it's on the left or the right. People surround themselves with like minded people and they don't get out of kind of that echo chamber or that feedback loop to kind of reinforce whatever is in their heads. And there's kind of three groups of people that can really influence all of us. Number one, people we're close to, people we spend the most time with. That's pretty straightforward. Number two is the majority. So surround yourself with the majority of people that work out. Surround yourself with the majority of people that eat healthy. Surround yourself with the majority of people that don't smoke. For example, just three examples of habits that are common for people to try to start and or stop. And then powerful and successful people are other people that we try to emulate. Maybe that's good, maybe that's bad, but it's true. And so you got to be careful about, I think you got to be careful about who it is you kind of put on a pedestal and look up to. For example, I'm a huge Patriots fan, and we moved to New England 2 weeks before the Patriots won their first Super Bowl against the Rams. And so it was very easy to become a Patriots fan because we weren't fans of any team before then, coming from Portland, Oregon, where there was no team. There were lots of 49ers fans and Seahawks fans in Portland, but I was neither. So, but Tom Brady was a great quarterback. I don't think he's a great human being. Maybe he is, maybe he's not. I don't hold him on a pedestal. So, but could you, from a physical fitness perspective, could you learn a lot from Tom Brady? Heck yeah, that guy was very successful in a very demanding job, physical job, for 20 plus years and performed at a very high level right until he stepped away. So would I take marriage advice from him? Probably not. That didn't go so well for Tom. My wife and I just celebrated our 31st anniversary. I think I probably got him on that one. But we all make choices and we all deal with the consequences, and that's okay. But like those are the people that tend to influence your thought process. Double check and make sure that the right people are around you and are influencing your thought process. You got to find the cause or the trigger, the cue for your bad habits, and you got to fix it. Whatever the case may be, you have to figure out what drives it. If you're overeating, what is it? Why are you overeating? There's some emotion, most likely, that's driving you to overeat. If you're smoking, I got it. There's a nicotine addiction. Totally real. Totally understand that. With that said, there's something else driving that behavior outside of the nicotine addiction. If you procrastinate, that's almost always because there's an emotional reaction to something that's driving that procrastination. You got to figure out what that is. If you want things to be different in the future, you can't take the same actions that you're taking now and expect the results to be different. So you've got to find out what's causing those behaviors and you've got to fix that. In addition to that, you want to make whatever the first hurdle is that you've got to get over, you want to make it as low as possible. And so like we talked about earlier, if your goal is to work out, just say, I'm going to be at the gym every morning at 7 a.m. Monday through Saturday. I didn't say anything about doing a workout. I didn't say anything about, knocking out P90X. I didn't say anything about doing Olympic level workouts. It's literally be at the gym. So you got to make the response super easy. And you can build on it from there. What you're trying to do is change the behavior and establish the behavior and build on that behavior going forward. So don't make the mistake of trying to eat the elephant in one bite. You can only eat the elephant one bite at a time, and it takes a lot of bites. So the other thing I'll say is don't confuse motion with action. And this one is critical. A lot of people think because they're busy that they're productive. That's not true. That's not true at all. I used to coach a lot of hockey, and I would tell players, move your feet. And they would say, well, I am moving my feet. No, you're not. When you skate, you have some type of momentum, and you will continue to move forward even when you stop moving your feet. It's the only sport that I know of that works that way. So every other sport, when you stop running, you're in one spot. It's very easy to see, oh, my feet aren't moving because I'm in one spot. It's very different in hockey. So, but you can't confuse motion with action. Planning, researching, strategizing are not actions. That's okay. They're things you need to do, but they're not actions. They don't produce a result. Don't confuse those. Oh, I'm researching how to form an LLC. Okay, great. That doesn't give you an LLC to start your business. I'm researching the market. That's great. It doesn't help you sell any product, develop a prototype, start building your customer base. Actions deliver results. It's a verb, right? Compete is a verb, and you got to think about it that way. Motion becomes procrastination, and that's a big challenge because it feels like you're doing something because you're busy. And I'm not saying don't plan. I'm not saying just screw everything and take your shots with wild abandon. You have to plan, you have to do those things, but don't confuse it with action because it's not. It's not action. And then again, design your environment to make good habits easy. We talked about getting rid of all the junk food and replacing it with fruit. If you're trying to watch less TV, take your remote and put it in a drawer in the other room or put it downstairs. So instead of coming in the door and mindlessly turning on the TV, you have to actively go and seek out that remote to turn your TV on. You know, that's a very different activity than mindlessly picking up and turning on the remote. So design your environment to make good habits easy. If you want to go work out, make sure your gym clothes are laid out the night before. Oh, I got to get up and put my bag together. I don't feel like doing it today. Lay them out so they're right there. Hell, go to sleep in them so you can roll out of bed, brush your teeth, and go straight to the gym. But set your environment up so it makes your habits as easy as possible. And you're going to optimize by small choices. When you think about all the things we've talked about so far in this video, they're all small choices, but it's the small choices that deliver a big result. So in James Clear's book, he talks about getting 1% better every day, which is a great way to think about it. But if you annualize that over a 365-day year, if you get 1% better every day, you're going to be 38% better at whatever that subject is by the end of the year. A 38% improvement in 1 year, simply by getting 1% better every day. And a 1% improvement is probably imperceptible in by most people. And we'll talk a little bit later about how to use that to your advantage, but you don't need to make big changes. It's not hitting home runs. It's consistently hitting singles that puts runs on the board. And so that's where you want to spend your time and focus. Automate good habits as much as possible. If you're trying to save money, have money automatically deducted from your pay and dumped into a savings account so you never ever touch it. You can automate grocery orders now so you can buy healthy food instead of saying, what are we going to buy at the store this week? Set things up so that it repeats the order over and over and over again. That's one way to do it. But as much as you can automate good habits, the more likely you are to stick to them. And then use rewards to make your habit satisfying. We talked about earlier, I'm going to run on the treadmill and then I get to watch my TV show. Or I'm going to eat a good meal and then I'm going to go for a walk. The walk is my reward. Instead of having dessert after a satisfying meal, have a piece of fruit. It's sweet, does the same thing. It's way less calories, but it satisfies and can satisfy a sweet tooth because it's got the sugar that you're looking for. But the more you can use rewards to make a habit satisfying, the likely you are to stick with that habit. Remember, positive things get rewarded, or positive things tend to happen more. Negative things tend to happen less. When the outcome is good and fun, we want more of it. When the outcome is bad and negative, we want less of it. So change your thought process on your habits. For the good habits, you want a good and positive mindset. For the bad habits, you want a negative mindset, i.e., that is no good for me. I don't like what happens after this activity, so I'm not going to do that activity anymore. The other thing is use a habit tracker. So this is really important because if you do this right, you're not going to notice a lot of these changes. They're just going to happen. And it's useful if you just track these habits for 3 months to go, shoot, I forgot that when I started, I was only walking 5 minutes a day. Now I walk 60 minutes a day, and I'm up from 500 steps a day to 6,000 steps a day, all from just increasing 500 steps a week over 3 months, something like that. So it's a great way to go It's a great way to kind of track your progress, and it's a good reward yourself. Plus, the act of putting it in the habit tracker is a habit itself and reinforces the behavior that you're trying to make stick. So it's really important. Plus, it holds yourself accountable because if you miss something once, it's not a huge deal. Let's say we'll go back to we want to work out Monday through Saturday. Let's say you travel for work on Wednesday and you can't get there. Okay, fine. That's really not a problem, but you better get there Thursday, right? Get the habit back in place, get the process back in place. Because if you miss 2 times, that starts a different habit. And that's not a habit you want to start. So that's one way to think about it. That habit tracker can be super helpful. And it breeds consistency. So, yeah. Look, guys, getting over the reef. You got to get over the reef to get out into the open ocean so you can get saved. The only way to do that is to make small, steady progress. It's not going to happen immediately when you look at even like the movie, sticking with our theme here. He spent, what was it, over a year, 2 years, getting ready, making rope, building the raft, getting Wilson ready to be lashed down, so putting together all the packages, tying down the doors to the outhouse that he used for a sail to help him get over the reef. And he was tracking the weather, tracking the tides, all of those things to put himself in the best chance to be successful. So I hope you're able to use some of these things to help yourself become successful on some of these habit changes that you're looking to make. I'd love to hear your experience on these. Leave us something in the comments. You can shoot us an email at saltygingertalk@gmail.com. Don't forget to go to our website, saltygingertalk.com. All of our content's on there. Links to our social medias on there. You can sign up for our newsletter on there, or you can shoot a note to us on there because we've got a contact button on the page there. So thanks for coming back, guys. Appreciate having you. I hope you guys have a great week, and we'll talk to you next time.